The following program is brought to you by Fanbags Cornhole, Chicago's official supplier of professional cornhole boards and bags. Choose from any of their officially licensed designs or have my boy Brian design a custom set from anything from a selfie to your company's logo. Visit www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS to get 10% off your entire order. That's www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS for 10% off. Step up your game with Fanbags Cornhole.
It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is Craig Bowers. And joining us tonight is special guest, friend of the show, just a great dude overall, Brian Tonsoni, a.k.a. Coach Tonsoni of Delphi Bracketology and, of course, Assembly Call, our rival podcaster within the Big Ten, who's always been a big supporter of what we do, and they do an absolutely fantastic job covering the Indiana Hoosiers. So that's the nicest thing we'll say about IU basketball here today. But you're a great dude, and we always appreciate your positive energy and spirit. We always see you at Mackey Arena covering the game. So here you are back on Boilers and Stands. How we doing, Coach?
We're doing wonderful. It's conference tournament time just around the corner for the NCAA tournament, and what we do at Delphi Bracketology is make sure we can help you guys understand, where Purdue's going to go and who they're going to play and all that good stuff tonight. And it's always fun to talk to you and Craig. It's been a friendship that has been incredible on my end to get to know you guys and talk some good basketball with everyone. And so I'm looking forward to the show.
Let's get it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say a few really nice comments coming in for you from the chat. Everybody's excited to see you. And Jeff Parks is asking, Mrs. Tonsoni, have any pie cooked up to get you ready for tonight, Coach?
Well, yeah, I say the dumbest things on assembly call, and I rile up the fan base. I'm either beloved right now or hated for what we said Sunday. But, so one of the things I said is when I'm down and out for losses, I like to go eat some pie, and that's got a life of its own. So that's where that's coming. No, I did have to make.
I normally go the Taco Bell route when I'm going with my depression eating.
So anyway, no, that's where that comes from.
Okay. I gotcha. Hey, Coach, I used to be a high school teacher for 17 years, and I just think this story about what you've done with Delphi Bracketology is so unique and so special. Anytime that you can take something that is a subject or content within the classroom and then apply that to things outside of the classroom and make it a special project that is tangible, that those students can put their hands on and make something that's productive, that's enjoyed by others, is special. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you guys do there at that school?
Well, we've been doing this for 10 years, and it's basically a club. It has been a before school, after school club for a while where we get together and we try to predict we try to act like the NCAA committee and put together a bracket. It's not really what we would do, though. It's what we predict the committee would do. And then we try to share through our Twitter feed and online presence and our shows, and then coming on your show is try to share information to help the basketball fan kind of understand what's going on with bracketology. But we meet once a week. This year we had a power hour scheduled into Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I was able to have some of those students during the day, which allowed us to talk more and do more. And so that's basically what we do is we talk college basketball. We look at the data, the quad wins, the net, all of that to try to formulate seeds 1 through 16 before Selection Sunday. I don't know if we're any good afterwards to help fill out your brackets when, the pools come out and the money gets flowing. But we're sure pretty good at trying to predict where teams will go.
Right. How many students typically are involved in that from one year to the next?
It's usually about 5 to 15. And so, when we had class, we had 28, but not everyone was active. Wow. We have an active group of about 9 this year that's really, really good at learning and talking the talk.
Good deal. And as we talk about what you guys use to come up with your bracketology and projected seeds and that type of stuff, obviously, the committee's looking at a lot of different things. The thing that's referenced the most is the net. That's where all the quad 1, 2, 3, 4, the quad 1A wins, all that stuff comes into. But beyond that, what other types of data analytics, metrics go into that toolbox? And I like to call it a toolbox, right? Because at the end of the day, there's still people that are they're using objective measures, but eventually they're making somewhat subjective calls because there's a human element in there as well. What all goes into that toolbox?
Yeah, there's some things that have been stated the committee looks at, but there's no magic formula for bracketologists or the casual fans to say this team is ahead of this team. And that's one of the hardest things we have to communicate to basketball fans. It's not a scoreboard. You can't look up and see, your baseball team is 3.5 games behind, that type of thing. And so people misunderstand the net as being that absolute. And when they start comparing one team to another or their team to a team that's in, if you have a team that's out, there's a little frustration when the record is the same because of those data points that you mentioned. So the net is a mathematical formula created by the NCAA to sort teams, to pick out good wins and bad wins. And it is their metric. It's just like KenPom. There is another metric called strength of record that these mathematicians or companies create to try to judge who are the better basketball teams. All of those are on the spreadsheet, those metrics. The net is offense and defensive efficiency and who you play and who you win. So it's results and it's basketball efficiency. It's flawed a little bit. It's not perfect because there are ways you can game the system. The Big 12 has done a little bit of that this year. But it is better than the old RPI, in my opinion, and it is a rather good formula. It gets a lot of criticism right now from teams and fans that are outside of the tournament, but then that's a pretty fair representation, I think, of college basketball. I'd like to see a little bit of adjustment, but there are then they break that into quad wins. Those are quality wins. You have 4 quads, with 4 being the easiest teams on your schedule. There's strength of schedule, non-conference strength of schedule we look at, road and neutral record. All of this is on the team sheet that the committee will look at for one particular team. And the problem is that some teams are good in one and other teams are good in another, and they're very close. And that's where that human element you spoke of comes in, that they're going to have to discuss, and then they take a vote of 12 members. And I don't know if it's majority or 8 that wins a vote and moves a team in or moves a team up a seed line. So you could have quite a few committee members who think, Houston should be the third number one, but others think Connecticut should be the second or third seed line debate on the one seed line, and they're going to debate, and at some point they're going to take a vote, and it's finalized, and that's the way it is. And there's good reasoning to have UConn 2 and Houston 3 and vice versa. It's just got more votes in the 12 person committee. That's what makes it hard to predict, because of that human element with all that data sitting out there. So
you're saying keep the net, because there's some people that don't like the net, but you're saying keep it.
I do. The WarrenNolan.com, where we get our information, has an RPI sheet, and you can go back and see the listing of the teams based on the old metric. And when you compare that, the better teams are at the top in the net than they are in the RPI. So right there, that tells me it's a better measurement. I will say, Greg, that I don't think it is a perfect measurement, because the blowout wins against weaker opponents creates great offensive efficiency and great defensive efficiency. There has to be a way for people who are far smarter than I am in math to figure out a formula there to adjust it more efficiently than the net is. You have Ken Palm and all of that, and they try to adjust for your opponent. But I do think it's rather fair. There are just a few outliers on the net. So I am a proponent of the net. I know I'm probably one of the smallest.
Well, and I think, the BCS with football, we've come to realize that now they're expanding the college football playoff. Like when you have a system like this, there's never going to be a perfect system, right? Somebody is going to get jobbed one way or the other. Somebody is going to get left out of the party one way or another. Now, college basketball, you have obviously a less gripe when you have 69 teams that make it to the tournament. So if you're the 71st, 72nd team on the bubble, you don't get as much of a gripe. But, when teams look at the quad one wins and things of that nature, that certainly is what's going to play a big role in it.
Yeah, it is. I think the committee, this is where people will disagree with me too. I think the committee does a great job with what they're tasked to do, which is to pick the 68 best teams. 32 automatic qualifiers, which games are being played right now to get automatically in, and then 36 teams that don't win. I think they do a good job. There's always a seed here or there that I may disagree with, or there may be a team that was selected that we missed, so obviously we're going to disagree with that. But they're tasked. If there's an issue, and I tell fans this all the time, if there's an issue, it's with the NCAA and their process, but the committee members who go there do what they're tasked to do. And it's not easy. We have gone back and forth with our 5, 6, and 7 seed lines the last 3 days. We've had a team on the 5 line, then we look at it closer, and now they're down to the 7 line. And I think that's where then teams look at it, or fans look at it and sometimes get frustrated. But yes, I am thanks for the kind words.
Yeah,
so, it's an interesting thing. It's fun. And I think for the most part, the NCAA bracket is done quite well by the committee overall.
Has it gotten harder for you here lately with, more 16, obviously we all understand the 16 seed that won last year, but 15 seeds becoming more common, winning year to year. And just with, I don't know, has the landscape, because of NIL, transfer portal, that additional COVID year, has those, have those things changed how hard it is for you guys to determine who the top 68 teams are, because you're basing it off of who they've played on their schedule? But I think anybody from Purdue that roots for Purdue can tell you, well, Purdue's played a couple teams that have ousted them the last few years that you'd look at their schedule and say, well, they've played nobody, but then all of a sudden Purdue's got their hands full showing up against them in the tournament.
Yeah, I think Parity has affected bracketology. It's really affected college basketball for all those things that you mentioned. I think you're seeing better teams at lower levels that can compete with the higher ranked teams. Well, that messes up your bracketology as well. But I think you're seeing that in basketball. I'm not sure that's a horrible thing. But you are seeing, we were down covering the Horizon semifinals last night, and boy, that was good basketball, and those guys are going to be 15 seeds. Now, I don't know that they're good enough to upset a 2, but when you start looking at it and you understand the 12-5 upsets that everyone picks and the 13-4 upsets, you start understanding that these small colleges, the teams that win are really, really good. And so, yes, it makes it difficult. Like this year, the last we seed to the top 46. And really, after 20, even after maybe 17, it starts to become where you just throw a dart at it and hope you're right putting in, because one team has a great quad 1 record and the other has a great net, and they're different. And you're seeing a lot more teams with similar resumes. And I do think it's due to the portal and all of that. It's harder to, we have 3 teams right now who are very, very dominant. One of is your Purdue Boilermakers, but you have 3 teams that are really dominant, and then you have maybe a little minor tier, and then everyone else, if they get hot, they can win a game or 2. It's really good, and that makes our job hard, but I think it makes the tournament at least enjoyable for me when I'm going to be on the outside watching, and nerve-wracking for you guys who need to win a game or 2.
Yeah. And I think it's important to, and I know we've gone back and forth on this and on Twitter before, that net is a frame reference, right? Like it's a reference point for them to jump off of. But then that committee is going to dig into it. So some of the complaints you hear is like, well, how is a game against the number 75 team on the net on the road treated the same as a number 3, win against the number 3 team in the country on the road? Well, they're not, right? Because the committee is going to dig in and look at the actual schedule and look at the actual wins, but it's just a frame or reference point for them to jump off of, correct?
Absolutely. The team sheets have it broken down into quad 1, 2, and 3. You see who they played, when they played them, home or away, the score. And so those cutoffs are arbitrary. So you beat the 75 team, and that's a quad 1 on the road, but you lose to the 76, so that's a quad 2. The committee knows that difference, and we'll definitely look into it. They're meeting right now. They're taking their second day of votes. They'll probably have, your first 2 seed lines at least selected, maybe not finalized here by tomorrow on Wednesday. But they dive into that, and then they have discussions. So they will talk about a group of teams or a team, and they'll have a conference advisor where a member of the committee has watched that conference. So they will say, here's who played a strong schedule inside their conference. Here's a team who might have played only the good teams a couple times. So, I mean, it is more in depth than just the net and quad 1 and saying they have 7 quad 1 and 2 wins. So they're better than a team who has quad 6 wins. Those are really and that's what I say the committee does a good job. They watch this stuff all year long. They get reports from their conference advisors. They are monitoring this, and then they spend, I would say, 12 to 18 hours in a committee room with all their TVs looking at all this stuff, and they really pick it apart with the details and know what's behind those numbers, not just taking those numbers.
Yeah, and as you were referencing those 1 seeds, I heard you mention an argument between whether UConn's 2 or whether Houston's 3. And I think I know where you're going with that. So as we transition to talking to Purdue a little bit here, and if you analyze quad 1 wins, quad 2 wins, quad 1, quad 2 losses between Houston, UConn, and Purdue, I think it's relatively close, right? But then when you start to break it down, let's look at quad 1A. And Purdue's resume in terms of wins throughout the season, especially in the non-con, that quad 1A, which for those of you guys listening, that would be top 15 home, top 25 neutral, and top 50 on the road. So it's basically half of what quad 1 is in each one of those categories, right?
Correct.
Purdue's quad 1A win just blows everybody else out of the water this particular year. Are you, as of right now, just pretty set on the fact that Purdue is the number 1 overall seed?
Yeah, I really do. When you talk about those 1A, and then where you win these games too. So not only do you have quad 1A wins, but you have several of them away from Mackey Arena. Number 4, number 5, number 8, number 13, number 15 twice, number 16, number 22 away. Those are all quad 1 wins. I think that's 8 quad 1 wins. And when you talk about Houston, they have 5 one of these 1A wins, and Connecticut, they've gained some. So they're up there too. I think they have you tied at 8. That's where it gets razor thin. I can't promise you'll be the number 1 overall seed, but I would be shocked if not. And I'm not sure how much the conference tournament has to play with that, because like I said, they're already going to be working on quads 1 and 2. By Thursday night, they're probably going to have those pretty much seeded, other than maybe, 1 or 2 slots. And if Purdue isn't the overall 1 seed, it's because maybe Purdue slips up early and Connecticut plays in the Big East Championship, and they think that was enough just to flip that 2 to a 1. So it could still be on the line, but man, Purdue, I just think that their resume has stood out quite a bit most of the year.
So UConn has 8 quad 1A wins right now?
Yeah, I just looked that up. At one point, they only had 5. But again, you go the numbers, and 7, 11 twice, 13, they're in conference as opposed to a couple non-conference. Purdue, is a little bit different along those lines. They have 5 non-conference wins. So, again, depending on who's in that committee room and what they – if they're just looking at numbers, then Purdue and Connecticut is even. If they're looking at the quality, I think the quality of that, and then winning those back-to-back, I think in the Maui Classic is good too, because you don't have prep, you don't have rest. I think I think those games benefit teams with the natural ability who can go out and play, as opposed to teams who can scout you and beat you. You've had a couple losses where 3-point shooting and all of that has occurred on the road for you guys, but they had time to get ready for Purdue. So, I would vote if I were on the committee, clear cut, wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't spend too much time on it. But I can't give you 100% for certain, but they're going to Indianapolis and they're going to Detroit. That's I think, a rather simple thing I can promise you. So get your tickets.
Regardless of whether they're the number 1 overall seed or not, just because who the other number 1s are going to be this year, they're going to get that Midwest of Indy and Detroit. So, and right now you guys have North Carolina as the 4th number 1 seed, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be tight. I think Tennessee has a better resume. We think they're so close, and then we look at they played head-to-head. North Carolina won that. Again, that is not on the official list of things you're supposed to look at, but in the human element, if I have 2 teams that are even and one team won by double digits, I know it was at North Carolina, but I'm probably going to lean that way. I think our group is leaning that way. I think that could spin too, Craig, if North Carolina gets upset in the quarterfinals and then you see Tennessee go to the SEC final. I think you can maybe see that difference. And maybe it's set right now. If they vote today or tomorrow and Tennessee's already the better team and they both get to the championship of their conference, I think then Tennessee will be in. So it's going to be one of those 2 most likely. I don't see Arizona or Marquette or anyone jumping up to the other 1 seed line. And then that throws into you guys who's going to play in the 2 seed category for you, because you can't get the 5th team. You can't get the 5th best team. So Tennessee, if Tennessee's 5 and North Carolina's 4, Tennessee can't come to the Midwest, even though it's maybe closer to go to Detroit than Boston or somewhere or the South to Dallas. That is I believe by rule, the number 1 seed can't get the 5th overall seed. I'd have to double check that for you guys. So you're looking at Marquette or someone like that being your opponent or being your 2nd seed in your region.
Right. So that's why, because that was going to be one of my questions. And like, if the home court advantage is locked up, then what does it matter? Well, that's what matters. Then is you don't want that what could have been a 1 seed is your 2 seed in your bracket. Yeah, and really, if you're looking at the top 4 seeds, I think there's a hierarchy in there of teams that I would be a little nervous of as far as when it gets down to an Elite 8 or a Sweet 16. All those teams are good. I mean, you're talking about the 16 bet teams this year are going to be seeded 1 through 16, and your 1 through 4 seeds.
That's something else we've learned, fellas, about doing this. I used to think, oh man, someone got a 6th seed, they're not very good. You're a top 25 team if you get a 6th seed, and you might be a top 25 team if you get that first 7th seed. I mean, that's math I think I learned in 2nd grade or something, my multiplication tables. I always just thought, oh, they're not good. It's a down year if you get a 4 or 5 seed. Well, those teams are good. And I think that also is good for fans to understand when you get to matchups of a 5 versus a 1 or a 4 versus a 1. You're not talking about an advantage that's huge. You're talking about a real solid team and how difficult it is to go 6-0 and cut down the nets. It is very, very difficult, and it depends on a lot of factors because these are good basketball teams. Even the 8 seeds, top 32, your worst 8 seed is the 32nd best team in the country. I started changing my perception of those teams and the NCAA tournament once I started doing the brackets. Brad commenting here, if you're listening on audio, absolutely. We should take a look at some of those for you guys to see who potential matchups are. And obviously Purdue should handle that and advance to the Sweet 16 and even further. But it's not a walk in the park until you get to the Elite Eight.
We're not counting our chickens in any round at this point, Coach. Even that first round, the 16 seed is going to be met with hellfire and brimstone from the home crowd fan base at Gamebridge Fieldhouse, and we're hoping the team brings the same kind of energy towards them. I don't know where you want to take this next, Craig. I mean, I'm stick to the Purdue centric. Maybe going over who the 8 seed potentials could be would be a good spot.
Well, I guess first of all, I would say we can't overlook the 16 seed anymore. Like we can't. We have to be honest about that. So I guess as you look through, so right now on your 16 seeds, you have Quinnipiac, Longwood, Merrimack, Stetson, Norfolk State, Grambling State. Is there any 16 seed in there? You've watched Purdue play. You've watched the teams that Purdue has struggled with in the past. Is there anybody on that 16 seed line that you're like, oh, they're kind of built like a North Texas, or they're kind of built like an FDU that might worry you in any way, shape, or form about Purdue?
No, because you got Zach Edey, and I know that happened last year. And I know I'm an IU guy, but you guys are a good basketball club, and I think your fans need to go in with confidence. And like last year, anything can happen, but it takes a lot to make that 16 seed. Maybe stay away from Stetson with the Blackman kid from Marion. If he comes back to Indianapolis, he just dropped 40 the other day in their championship game. And you don't know until you play them, but they're generally here's I don't even want to remotely talk about concern with the 16 seeds, but they're generally the worst teams in the field, but they're small and they're quick. And they're the worst teams because they play in small conferences, and I'm not sure they recruit really good size. So the advantage for Purdue is obviously Zach Edey and the size, and then there's always that question about your guard play, which has been a lot better this year, handling pressure, and Lance Jones has just been a tremendous addition for you all that gives you a variety of situations to overcome, and I think that's enough to handle any athletic team, but they're generally smaller and athletic when you get to this seed line.
Right. And then that 8-9 seed line right now, you have for the 8s, you have Dayton, Texas, Florida, FAU, Northwestern, Colorado State, Nebraska, Oklahoma. So my first question would be just about the bracket rules. Since that would be in the second round, can Purdue still play Northwestern and Nebraska in the second round since they've already played them in the regular season?
Yeah. I think the answer, you've played Northwestern twice, so that couldn't happen until a Sweet 16. If you play Nebraska in the championship, you would play them twice, right? I think you only played Nebraska once. Right. You did not play them at Mackey. I think there is a possibility if you had to play them in the second round, but I think that'll try to be avoided at all costs. So, that eliminates a couple of 9 seeds from playing in your bracket. We haven't updated our bracket. Barstool got upset with this today. They looked at our stuff. We are appreciative of them referencing our work, and then we were at the Horizon last night and didn't put our update up, and they caught us on that. But they were very, very supportive. So we have to update that bracket here soon. We'll do that probably tomorrow night. to see who's actually playing who on our bracketology. But if you're interested in what we do, I'll update this seed list later tonight. The seed list tab on our webpage is probably the place you want to go to just see the seeds, and the matchups will happen here Wednesday or Thursday night when we kind of get a solid list. I don't think you'll see those Big Ten teams in Indianapolis as a 9 if they're on that seed line.
And I guess that's what I'm reading off of is that seed list tab.
Jesus.
So in those 8 and 9 seed teams that you guys have listed right now, is there a team in there that you think, just from a matchup standpoint, might give Purdue a little bit more trouble than the others?
Yeah, I think, Dayton. We think Dayton's been a 5, 6, 7 seed all year long, and now there's enough teams up there that either a St. Mary's or a Dayton has to probably be on the 8 line, maybe a Boise State. Boise State is only lost 5 or 6 games if they fall to an 8 line. So you also have to look at some of those teams on the 7 seed line. If we're wrong by 1 line, so I would say a Boise State, St. Mary's, you need to look at. Those teams are really good basketball teams. You can't discount FAU. Some people have them on the 10 line. We have them on the 8. They have a Final Four team from last year, capable of getting hot in any one particular game, have a big guy in the middle that, I don't know that anyone can guard Zach, but there's some size there. So the 2 that we have right now, I think, are Dayton and FAU. But I think all of those 8 seeds are potentially dangerous, and Purdue will have to play really good basketball. Texas has some athletes. Florida has been up in our 6 and 7 seed line. So the top 8 seeds, I think, are really, really solid on that list right now. So there will have to be some good basketball played, but to get to the Sweet 16.
And I don't want to see FAU because they have Final Four DNA, right? They've already been there one time. And the other thing to me, a lot of times when people talk about the type of teams that could potentially beat Purdue, they talk about small, quick guards. Well, there's a caveat to that, right? Because Purdue's not going to let you get a bunch of threes off, and they're not going to let you get a lot of shots at the rim, but they're going to give you that mid-range. They've shown that. They're going to play drop coverage. That's how IU beat us twice last year. Jordan Hood-Schifino made like 79 out of 80 friggin' mid-range shots against us. And when you watch FAU last year in that tournament, you're like, man, they just hit tough, like mid-range shots over and over and over again. So FAU is not necessarily a team I would want to face coming out of that 8 seed.
They have bucket getters is what you're talking about. They go out and get buckets. And that's scary in a one and done situation.
I think from my standpoint, just watching Purdue the last, however many 6-7 years, like the year they were playing St. Peter's, the next game, had they played North Carolina, they would have played up to Carolina. They had played them earlier the year, they beat them, and they tend to play up and down to their competition. Well, if it's a team that is got their antennas up, and I would imagine an FAU team that was in the Final Four last year is going to have your antennas up. Like it's just about like them shaking the nerves of the tournament itself. And then once they get into it, like I know UConn had some things fall their way as far as matchups favorability last year that helped them propel to a national championship. But for me, just looking at Purdue and the run they went on the year they went to the Elite Eight, almost to the Final Four. They took down Villanova and then Tennessee, and then they played Virginia wire and should have beat them. Like when they play those caliber of schools, I never worry, which is why during the regular season the last 3 years they're undefeated, because they get up for those games. They get up for Arizona this year at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Obviously, they're going to be competitive games. I'm not selling those teams short by any means, and anybody can win any given night. But it's almost at times with Purdue that I'd prefer them to play the team that has the resume and the cachet attached to them.
And Greg, I think that this year the team has shown a focus coming back off of the tough times last year, and I think you got to kind of bank on that until it doesn't happen. But I think you're right. I think that things will be, I think they'll be focused, and I think they'll make a good run. And that's no guarantee that they will go, very, very far.
Right. And I think, I know we can talk about focus or this and that, but I also think there's something about some of these smaller conference teams that we talk about have really highly skilled, shorter, quicker guards. And the gradient between the type of player that Purdue has in their front court compared to some of those teams is so great that the contrast in styles is so different between those two teams that there's like this battle between styles and who can match the other ones. And now you could say Purdue needs to assert their will, and they do, right? Purdue needs to assert their will in that situation and make that advantage work for them more so than it works for the other team. But then when they play some of those other high-level teams, you don't have that extreme gradient between the two. So it's more just about like who plays better on that given day, because you don't have this dramatic difference between speed and quickness versus size and maybe a little bit slower player, but size and skills at the same time. So you get this weird dynamic. And we've seen it over and over again, and Painter's talked about it. Like when Purdue, you said undefeated in the regular season, Greg. I think you meant regular season non-conference. But when Purdue's played top 25, top 30 teams, their record the last 3 years is insane. But when they play teams closer, the teams they've lost to have been ranked closer to like net 100 and below or net 80 and below. And I think some of those teams sell out, and I don't want to call it a gimmick, right? But they're like, the only thing we can do is sell out on Zach Edey. The only thing we can do is be extra physical and make the refs put them on the spot and see if they call everything or not, right? A lot of those better teams aren't going to do that. They're going to, they're not going to go to that extreme. They're just going to think that they can play a regular type of defense, a regular type of setup with high quality players and still beat Purdue. So I think there's some extreme situations in there that have come about over the last couple of years. But at the end of the day, Purdue's got to use their advantages that they have against those teams and make it more of an advantage for them and assert their own will in those types of situations.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say the other thing that if you have a mobile center that pulls Zach out and they run some stuff, but Purdue's seen all that, and Coach Painter does a good job. He knows all the ways that they're going to be attacked and everything. And I do think it comes down to that focus and making sure you play, and the pressure. Last night, Coach Campy of Oakland was talking about how difficult it is to be a one and done or one-team league because the pressure is so immense every game of a conference tournament, the Horizon tournament. And he said no one really understands how much pressure there is. The thing that Purdue can do is just if they can find a release valve for all of that's been heaped on them, especially after last year, and just play basketball. If you play basketball, there's so many built-in advantages that from the coaching staff all the way down to your players. I think that that should put them in good position.
Well, and I think Braden Smith has really brought a different attitude and approach to facing the pressure that they have heaped on them from their failures last year and failures of teams they weren't a part of. And there's a long history where Purdue has to overcome some demons, the coach and the players included, that there's a lot of history there, and that can be a hard thing to overcome, but you got to have the type of DNA to stare it in the face and not be afraid to talk about it. And Braden Smith and Matt Painter and Zach Edey and these guys have faced these, the elephant in the room head on. They've stared it right in the face. So I like that. And Braden has, I keep highlighting Braden because he really plays with a chip on his shoulder. And I think it takes that kind of FU attitude to overcome some of the demons that Purdue's going to have to overcome. So Joe has joined here. Joe Jackson. Everybody was like, "Where's Joe? Why is Greg on this show? We need to get Joe back in here."
I even said that.
This is an analytical show, and Greg has absolutely no use here. We need the smart guy in here. Joe is in here. But we do have to take a timeout here unless Joe had anything else to add on the Purdue end of things before we pretty much put a bow on that. Joe's shaking his head no. So let's take a time out here and segue over to autograph. And then I have to go put my daughter to sleep here tonight. So that I'm going to let Joe and Craig put a bow on this thing. I know, Coach, that me and you finished the show trying to figure out the Bears free agency and quarterback situation, but we'll save that show for another day. So I'll let you guys take it from here, but I appreciate you. You know how much I appreciate our friendship, Coach. So thank you again for coming on, and I'm sure these guys will have you in good hands the rest of the way.
All righty, bud. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Be good.
Yes, sir. I'll try.
All right, so we want to talk about Autograph a little bit. Sponsor for a little bit now, and we've talked about them in detail. Also, is my mic good? It's my first real test at it.
Yes, your
Cool.
mic's good, buddy.
Mic's good, just like the Autograph app, where you can find all of your Purdue content, or for Coach Tonsoni, you can find all your IU content in one specific spot. Whether it be podcast, articles, whatever you kind of are looking for. And it's just a cool app where you can interact with others. There's leaderboards to show how much you interact, and then they also reward you, whether it be they've dropped multiple ticket packages for the Purdue MSU game, the Purdue Wisconsin game. There were fans that got to go for $16 a ticket, which, if anybody looked at prices, that's an insane deal. They have stuff coming up for, I believe, the Elite Eight, which you could win a potential VIP package, and it is all free. You just sign up, use code BITS, and then just pretty much consume the contents you already do, but now have the chance to be rewarded for it.
Yeah, and like I've said many times before, what I love about this app is it rewards you for doing the things you already do. All you have to do is consume it through that app. The same blogs, the same podcasts, the same articles, whatever you would do, if you just access it through that app, then you're going to have a chance to win those rewards, okay? And they've are dropping a Big Ten tournament package. They're dropping some NCAA tournament packages, that VIP Elite Eight experience. Just a really awesome opportunity. And yes, there's only a few. I've had some people text me and be like, those tickets were gone in 10 seconds. Well, there's a lot of people trying to get them, and they can't give away, 100 of those tickets. But 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 people, depending on what they're rolling out, do have that awesome opportunity to get a hold of that chance. And you're not doing anything different than you normally would. You're just rolling through that app to get to that access to it first. So I think it's an awesome opportunity, and really appreciate the opportunity to work with Autograph, a company that Tom Brady was one of the original founders of way back when it officially started. So,
yep. And this QR code on the screen right here, you can scan it, sign up for free. It is on Android now, because I know for a little bit it was not. But yeah, use this QR code, use code BITS. It's for free, and then do what you got to do from there.
Yeah, and to be clear, I've had some people text me and be like, "What's the code?" And I say BITS, and they're like, "But what's the code?" Like, they think code BITS is all like one term for some reason. So the code is literally BITS, BITS. That is our code, Boilers in the Stands. So use that to sign up. It helps us out, helps you guys out, all those awesome things. Joe, kind of the next place we were going to jump off to.
Could I get
do you have more?
Can I get like a 10-second summary of what you guys have talked about, just so I know?
Yes. So primarily, Brian said that Purdue is locked in the #1 seed overall, no matter what happens. And he said that FAU as the 8th seed is definitely going to upset Purdue in the second round.
I did not say such things, but
No. We've talked about just what goes into the seeding process. We've talked about where Purdue likely will land, that unless something crazy happens in the Big Ten tourney, there's going to be some debate between them and UConn, but they're likely the #1 seed overall, and that doesn't really matter because they're going to still end up the #1 seed in the Midwest, going through Indy and Chicago. So whether they're first or third in the #1s, it doesn't really matter. We talked about potential 16 seed matchups, and we talked about potential 8 and 9 seed matchups. And kind of where we were going next was just a discussion of the Big Ten at large and the tourney, and then wrap up with some bubble talk.
All right, let's do it. I can intro the Big Ten a little bit, I guess. I know Purdue is obviously locked into the 1 seed. You guys talked about that at length. Illinois, Wisconsin. This is just general Twitter. I guess you can. If you disagree with this, then obviously jump in. But from what I've seen, Illinois, Wisconsin, absolute locks. Northwestern, Nebraska, they are locks. Michigan State is on the right side, but would probably be good for them to win that first round matchup. Iowa, Ohio State are the other two teams that maybe could get in without winning the actual championship. Is that, in general, before we dive in a little bit deeper, is that where you kind of see the Big Ten standing at?
Yeah, I'm not sure that Ohio State has they would have to probably win the tournament to get in. I know they've done well since the coaching change, and they've won 5 out of 6 or something of that line, and they have moved up into our consideration list. But there's too many teams that I think they have to jump with. I think they would, to get to the championship, they'd get 3 more wins. And history shows Texas A&M got to the SEC championship and were a lot closer going into the selection Sunday than Ohio State was, and didn't get in. Now, we've been saying this all along, guys. Trends are trends until they're broken. So what's happened in the past isn't always just an absolute. But I think Ohio State, Iowa's the team that I think has the better chance if other teams lose and some favorite teams win and open up a at-large spot on our bracket. Right now, we have 2 built-in bid thieves based on who won the conference. So when you look at our seed list, there potentially can be 2 more at-larges. If FAU and Dayton win their conference tournaments, we already have them as locks in. So if those locks win that, then I think it's Richmond, who is in our bracket now as the number 1 seed, and South Florida as the number 1 seed. If they get knocked out by the favorites, that opens up some room. That's where you're going to see in Iowa. But I think there's too many teams for Ohio State to overcome. They started the momentum of their season a little bit too late. For us, who knows? But I don't think Ohio State. But you're absolutely right on the others. You see some teams struggling in the Big Ten besides Illinois and besides Purdue. You know, Wisconsin was a 4 seed at the reveal. They've lost a lot of games. The question is, where do they land? I could see 7 or an 8, which is shocking for them. And then Michigan State, who knows what's happening. Their metrics are great, and speak of 7, 8 seed range. Their resume is horrific, which speaks maybe should be bubble and maybe close to being out. I do think Michigan State needs to win at least a game to be safe.
Would because they play Minnesota in the first round, and if they do win, they play Purdue. Let's say they beat Minnesota, would they be basically a lock at that point for you?
Yes. When it gets down to that last 9, 10 seed kind of line, I don't know that I can tell you guys there's a lock because of all the nuances that the committee might look at. Obviously, with the loss to Minnesota, I think they're in jeopardy. They could very well still be in, but they run the risk of an Xavier a few years ago that lost 5 out of their last 6 and had the wins on their resume and had a decent resume to get in and were left out. We missed on that one because we looked at the total body of work, which you're supposed to look at. But I do think a little late momentum for those last 4 seeds. So Michigan State needs to win that first game for sure.
Yeah. And I guess, Illinois is a lock, obviously. How much does a conference tournament matter to a team like that that's right now projected at a 4 seed? Ohio State is really, really hot right now since the coaching change. Iowa's been playing pretty good ball, even though they got beat by Illinois in like 2 out of the last 4 games. But the most recent game was relatively close. But let's say Ohio State beats Iowa. Ohio State comes in super hot, knocks off Illinois. Is that something that drops them a seed line, drops them a couple seed lines, or whatever? It's conference tournament, one and done, doesn't really matter to the committee.
Yeah, it's the body of work. It's your 31 regular season games plus your conference tournament games. So that's 1/32 of a resume. It's a loss. Where it matters is depending on how razor thin the team right below Illinois is. A loss and that team wins 2 or 3, then that's where Illinois will drop down maybe 1 spot. If that 1 spot is on a cut line between 4 and 5, then you see them move from a 4 and 5, but they only move 1 spot. I think what we've seen in the past, and again, trends are trends, is that teams that make a run, if they're already in the tournament, might move up a seed line or 2 by their. It's easier to move up than it is to move down. Now, obviously, if someone moves up, someone's inherently got to move down mathematically, right? So, but the teams are moving down more because the other team won. If everyone loses, I think it's locked in. And then Craig, the committee starts seeding tomorrow, if not tonight. I just got a picture. I got to go look at it. They start seeding the top of the lane by Thursday afternoon. They probably might have the top 4 seed lines, or Thursday dinner time. They'll have the top 4 seed lines initially seeded, not permanent. It can change. And I think Illinois' got a resume that is a solid 4 seed. There's a 1-3 seed that's open with Kansas injuries, where maybe a team sitting on that 4 seed line can bump up. But I think you're going to see Illinois on that 4 seed line. If we're wrong about that, I think it's probably lower, because their FAU win hasn't carried a whole lot of weight, and their quality of wins, they have a good number. It's not bad, but their quality of their resume is not. So I don't see them moving up, but a loss I don't see as an automatic negative unless they're razor thin.
Yeah, I'm looking at that 5 line, and I'm like, yeah,
it's ugly.
I don't know that 5
it's
line
ugly.
Can really jump just for Kansas, Alabama, Illinois, Auburn. Any of those lose early in the conference tournament. I don't know that 5 line jumps right away.
Agree. And I mean, we've moved teams on the 5 line. We moved teams off the 5 line. It's been a point of discussion for 3 or 4 days since things have kind of solidified. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like what we have there. That's what makes it hard. You know, does Gonzaga stay there? I don't know if we have them on the 5 or 6 line on the most recent
5.
one, because we changed. Yeah, 5. Like, they came from nowhere to be on the 5. If they win tonight, I think they're locked in with BYU on a 5, and then the other 2 5 spots. Throw a dart from them to Clemson or, San Diego State. You got 4 Mountain West teams to try to fit in. That's going to be interesting on Selection Sunday, who gets those last couple of 5s.
All right. Before I kick it to you, Joe, on Bubble Talk a little bit before we wrap up, please do, guys, hit the like button if you're in here. Lots of viewers. Again, we appreciate viewership has been up dramatically in the last couple of weeks. So we appreciate all of you guys coming in here. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Also, there is the super chat option if that's something that you want to do. If you want to make sure your chat is read on screen, or you just want to support us in terms of what we try to do and bring to you guys on a weekly basis, you can hit that super chat function and send a little bit of support our way. But we thank all of you again for viewing. Joe, fire away with some Bubble Talk, unless you have any more Big Ten stuff.
Well, okay, I got one quick question and then more Bubble Talk, but like half the Big Ten is sort of bubble. It's not bubbly, I guess, but they're kind of bubble area anyways. When you look at the 8-9, right, and we know Purdue's going to be a 1 seed, nothing can change that. They're going to be Indy, Detroit, hopefully Phoenix also. There's multiple teams in that 8-9 potential area in the Big Ten. Is there any sort of rule that goes into like within that first 2 rounds of Purdue not playing another Big Ten team? Is it just more of a they try not to do it, but it can happen? Is there anything that we should know about for that? I don't know if you guys already talked about that.
I think we did a little bit, but I'll add something to what we said previously. I think they're going to try to keep the Big Ten teams away from the 8-9 game in Indianapolis, but they also, if Purdue is the overall number 1, they try to make sure the 32nd team on the seed list goes to that list as some fairness for being the best team in the country per their decision making. So a lot of that, and when you have 2 Big Ten teams now, how is that situated there? So there's a couple of those bracketing principles that are going to come into play. I think we talked about Nebraska could possibly be a second round matchup if the committee needed it, but I really think they're going to try to avoid that at all costs.
All right, fair enough. So, yeah, we'll get to a little bit of Bubble Talk, and then we'll get out of here. We have to start with Indiana State. I think that's just where, especially not only for this state in general, like obviously people in Indiana, I think, care, but even across the country, just with how fun they are. They don't win their conference tournament, so they don't have the auto bid. Are they going to get – do you think they'll get it? Or obviously you don't know right now. It's going to come down to what happens over the next few days. But what would be your kind of guess as to what happens with them? And if you are wanting Indiana State in as a fan, what are some things that they should be rooting for maybe over the next week?
Yeah, I think we all should be rooting for Indiana State to make it. One, it's a local school, and we should support that. And second, I think the NCAA tournament's better when you have some quality mid-majors. And I think Indiana State has done what they can do They lost a third game in 3 days down the wire in the last minute. They have the metrics, the net of 26. They scheduled Alabama. They scheduled Michigan State. They didn't win those, but at the time, those were 2 top 10 teams. Michigan State was supposed to be a top 10 team when they scheduled them. They have 15 wins away from home. Their quad, everyone has injuries, so that evens out. But their quad 4 loss was one of their starting power forwards, Kent, was out. And the game before they lost I think a quad 3 loss, he had gotten injured early in the game. So those two, that 1 week where they lost back to back, they had a major piece missing. I think with all that being said, I think they're going to get in. Now it is razor thin. I think they're going to be in Dayton. Belmont a few years ago, 2019, in a similar thing, had a worse resume than Indiana State, worse strength of schedule, all of that stuff, and got in. Now, did they have a couple wins on there, a big Power 5 win, like a Nevada or someone like that? They might have. I haven't gone back and looked at that. But it comes down to you have some teams there that have really good net rankings and metrics and strength of schedules, but they haven't had the wins. That's Colorado, New Mexico, and Indiana State. And then you have some teams like Villanova and St. John's, and they've had more opportunities, and they've gotten some good wins. When you beat a Connecticut and you look at those things, that's kind of impressive as opposed to beating Bradley being your best team. So, again, the committee is half small school personnel and half big school, and it just depends on what happens. The last 4 in, sometimes the criteria goes out the window. You saw a Notre Dame team get in with 4 quad 1 and 2 wins a couple years ago. They were second or in the top 3 of the ACC, and the committee gave them the benefit of the doubt that they played the teams in conference. It wasn't their fault that the conference was so low. But when you really compare them, like you would compare the 5 and 6 seed lines, they really probably shouldn't be in. There's a surprise team almost every year. I'm going to think that Indiana State is that surprise team. Now, what you root for, FAU to win their conference, Dayton to win their conference. Like I said a little bit earlier, it opens up 2 spots. You want Virginia to lose early. You would want New Mexico to lose early. You would want maybe a Texas A&M, although I think Texas A&M might be in. Those teams that are on our bubble list there, the last 4 in or the first 4 out, if those teams lose, I think the committee has, Indiana, what they have a benefit, they've won 2 games. They advanced to their championship. They lost to a team that could have been an at-large as well. Like they didn't lose upset to Evansville or something like that. And they made a major comeback, down 17.
Or Chicago State.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that Indiana State will be in. No team in the 20s has been left out. Again, trends are trends until they're broken. I think you're going to see some trends broken this year. And that speaks well to New Mexico is in the 20s. Colorado's in the 20s on the bubble, and Indiana State. So, again, who gets the room? Fellas, it's also, too, when you got 12 people, who's in the room that's the biggest influence? Are they pro Power 6 and wins, or are they pro, hey, this is a chance we can give someone an opportunity to be in the big dance, go win in Dayton and advance because you did well in the regular season? Who gets that room? And that's something we can't predict. But I have a feeling, and I'm 100% personally biased. My son was a manager there for 4 years, and I like what Coach Schertz does. I think Coach Schertz runs really excellent offense. So this is where bracketology becomes tough because you have your biases, and you try to set them aside to, I can understand if they're left out, and probably their resume is out. But I have a feeling there's enough things working, and there's enough momentum and talk, and they're going to be talked about all week in that committee room. So I have a feeling they're gonna get to Dayton.
All right. I understand the bias, right? Because personally, if I was on that committee, like I would not allow any team from New Jersey on the bubble into the tournament personally. Just in general. We talked, that's not funny, Brian. We talked about if MSU beats Minnesota, are they in? I guess if they lost to Minnesota, obviously it depends on everything else that happens around that bubble. But let's say those next 3 or 4 teams behind them win their first game in the tournament. If MSU loses to Minnesota, they out. Like
Man.
your best bet.
No, I think Michigan State's going to end up being in with the loss. Man, that's what, 6 out of 7. But Mississippi State's in that same boat. They have 2 nice wins earlier in the season and really kind of fallen off here at the end. Villanova's got 17 wins but 14 losses. Texas A&M has 4 quad 3s, so it's a comparison. It's not just Michigan State in a vacuum. So that loss will be added to their resume, and then this will be late Friday night or Saturday morning when they vote their last 4 teams in. All of that will be taken into effect. But if the committee sees them at 38 or 39 early Friday, well, they would have lost on Thursday. But they're going to be in, I think, and you have to have 68 teams in. That's the other thing. So everyone on the 10 seed line loses their first game. Mississippi State loses, Michigan State loses. They don't automatically drop out. The comparison factor has to play. I think Michigan State is in because of their metrics. They're at 23. I mean, now you're talking about 4 teams that have never been left out before being left out for teams that in the tool of the NCAA says they're not as good. I think I get in disagreements online about the power of the net. I do think when it comes down to it, does the committee really want to say, here's our measuring tool, and it sucks so bad we're putting 4 teams out of the tournament that had top 30 metrics of our own? I don't think that's going to happen. I can see one if you don't have wins to back it up. The Baylor win, the Indiana State win, there's some nice wins there. Same with Mississippi State. So I think I don't know that they're going to put 4 teams in their metric in the top 30 out, because then that would really hit the fan, I think. So I don't know if that's right.
All right. On the flip side of that, Iowa's first game is not going to be a quad 1 game. Ohio State's like 55, 56 in the net. For them to have any realistic chance, they've got to beat Illinois probably to get another quad 1 win.
Yes. If I would say Indiana in, 2 years ago when they got in and beat the 8, they were a 9 seed and won that first one. Then they upset Illinois, and then they got beat on a buzzer beater in the semifinals. If Iowa can duplicate something like that, I think the win, Indiana had a quad 2 to start the tournament, and then maybe the quad 1 over the number 1 Illinois. I think Illinois would, not Illinois, but that would be, what would have to happen in that scenario for
I'll
Iowa.
let Joe ask this question.
Yeah, Drake Hobbs here says, and we're going to give a little context. IU has won 4 straight to close out the season. If IU makes it to Saturday or Sunday, do they get in? And then also, I'm going to add on a little bit because they have the same record as Michigan State, and we just talked about how Michigan State is going to be in probably. If you don't think IU is going to get in, maybe just briefly explain like the difference.
Man, you've been in my mentions on bracketology. I get this question. I get this question a ton, and I don't think I make a lot of people happy. I've been doing a lot of that this week, but there's no chance unless they win the championship. They're sitting at 93 in the net. I don't think 3 games in the Big Ten tournament is going to jump it up enough. I know people referenced Rutgers a few years ago with the 77 getting in, but Rutgers at the end of the year was 77 with all the wins. They were up the seed list of this. They were on the radar for most of the year, especially when they won 6 games in a row against ranked opponents. Indiana's wins, the quad wins, the numbers have gone up, but they're not those 1A that Craig and I talked about earlier in the show. They don't have a signature win. Their best wins are at home against 2 teams that are struggling, Wisconsin and Michigan State. Those are the 2 wins. Blowout losses on the road to teams that are in the tournament. A good close loss to Kansas is okay. But, yeah, they just have too much ground to make up. They've done a really nice job of changing up how they're doing things and playing some good basketball. They've also been the benefit of catching some teams at the right time. And so kudos to the kids and the coaching staff for fighting and finding some wins. But they're going to have to run the table in order to get in. And now the Michigan State comparison, Joe, it's not a record board. It's not a standings. 18-13, 18-13 is not a standings. And everyone sees, well, there's a Big Ten team in at the 10 seed line, and we have the same record. Why aren't we considered for the 10 seed line? Well, it's the whole NCAA, and Michigan State has those better metrics that do matter. And if there's a problem, it's, go after the fact that it's metrics more than anything else. But it's just too far. You're going to see Villanova take that spot. If it, more than Indiana, you're gonna see the Iowas, those people who, and I know Indiana beat someone, but that's where head-to-head doesn't matter. You don't automatically eliminate that. If that's the situation, then Penn State would be ahead of Indiana on the pecking order because Penn State had beaten Indiana twice. So, it's win the whole thing if you want to go to the NCAA tournament this year for Indiana.
All right, so we got a couple comments, and then we will get out of here. From Kurt Schnippel, Dayton is in no matter what. Yes.
Yeah, the weakness on their resume is the quality win situation, but their metrics are good. Their record is good. They are probably the best team if you look at it in A10. They're not the top seed. I do think Dayton, where you got to be concerned about Dayton is their seed. If they lose the first round game, are they an 8 as opposed to a 7? Could they fall any more like that in comparison to everyone else? But yes, I think Dayton is rather safe.
All right, cool. And then last one from Jeff Parks. Are low numbers making the field from some of the power conferences like Pac-12 and ACC open more spots for mid-majors, or are the at-large bids going to end up including some of these weaker teams?
I'm assuming
Jeff,
he means like weaker power conference teams versus mid-major teams.
Yeah. Jeff, that's a great question. I've been a proponent, and my word goes nowhere, that I think there needs to be 2 to 4 slots guaranteed for your non-Power 6 conferences, and then you can select them just like this committee does. Who's the best, quote, mid-major or whatever team, however you want to categorize that, and just pick top 4 because they play good basketball and they don't have the opportunities. And I don't necessarily want to see an 18-15 Villanova play a first-round game when you have a potential team, Princeton, if they get beat, they're 48 in the net. Would love to see them try to have a shot. Indiana State is an example for that. So the low numbers from the Pac-12 and the ACC, they should, in my opinion, Jeff, open up for some of the smaller schools, but I don't think so. And I love college athletics, but the amount of money that's flowing in college athletics determines a lot. And we're talking about expansion now of the NCAA tournament, and we're talking about the Power 6 breaking off and having their own tournament and stuff that I love. This NCAA tournament, the college football stuff is imploding because of profit. I won't ramble long on this, but I wish you were correct, Jeff, that it should open that up. But I think you're going to see the Mountain West deserves some of those teams in. I know they're not a power conference, but I also consider that somewhat of a mid-major, even though San Diego State made the Final Four, and I think they're a solid basketball conference. So they're going to have 5 or 6. I don't mind the low numbers in the power conferences going to them. I think that's good basketball. But yes, I do think these small schools deserve a chance. And I understand you want to put the best in there, but I think sometimes the definition of best gets lost. And maybe I'm just an old man, get off my lawn kind of guy. But, I would love it, Jeff, if what you're insinuating there is that it should go to the mid-majors and the smaller schools. I am 100% agreeing with you.
Yep. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over these next couple of years. Just with all of this, and then you hit on the money, and there's the football aspect and all that, and hopefully it doesn't take away or mess up the beautiful tournament that is in March soon. So, Craig, I know when people see your background, they usually have questions about it. If you want to talk about that really quick, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I'm doing the show live tonight from Brokerage Brewing Company over here in West Lafayette, Indiana. Real good friends of the show. They like to broadcast the show for the post-game shows and that type of stuff live from the brewery. So we certainly appreciate them and everything that they do. West Lafayette's oldest brewery, and in my estimation, in Tippecanoe County, it is by far and away my favorite brewery. Coach, I don't know if you made it up here yet. I know you made a reference about maybe meet me here. I don't know if you made it here yet or not.
I have not, but I'm going to look. I'm just going to add that to the list of places that I need to go.
Right on.
There we go.
Right on.
There we go.
So, and I certainly appreciate you coming on the show tonight, Coach, and everything that you do. I know, I told Joe and Greg earlier this year, I popped into a few of your guys' post-game shows just to see kind of what you guys do from a format style, how you approach everything else, because you've been doing this a long time. In terms of Indiana has one of the largest fan bases in the entire country, and it's hard to keep all them happy. And certainly you're never going to. But what you guys do over there and what you do specifically from a professional level is just amazing. And certainly somebody that I think all three of us look up to in terms of what we try to strive to do. Even though we're rivals, we can respect the professionalism and the expertise that you have in what you do over there on the IU side, and then obviously on the bracketology side as well. So once again, we appreciate your friendship through and through, and certainly just respect everything you guys do over there also.
Thank you. I've really come to appreciate all of you guys, maybe not Greg as much as you two. I like you two better than Greg. But it is what college basketball is. I have a hard time rooting for your guys, just from the rivalry standpoint, and I don't think that'll change. But I do wish you guys to enjoy a little bit of the tournament. And you guys do a good job. I think this is a space where podcasting has exploded over the last few years, but bringing information to fans is important. And I think that that's what we try to do at Assembly Call. That's what you guys are doing here with Boilers in the Stands. And then just being able to talk basketball with you guys and not have that rivalry crap get in the way. I think that's I strive for professional conversations. And with you guys on the show, at Mackey Arena, at the Big Ten tournament, wherever we run into each other, it's absolutely professional, despite the differences in who we root for. And I can't tell you personally how much it means to be invited. Your listeners are very appreciative. I appreciate that as well. And as an old man, I think society lacks some of that, and I appreciate where you guys are going with this. And I wish you have a few more. For you guys, I'll say this, and then I'll go viral again, like I've had a week of viral videos. I do wish you luck, and I wish you have an enjoyable tournament. And if you need anything, let me know.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you coming on, and I second all of the stuff that both of you guys said. I've enjoyed getting to know you more this year. You can follow him at Sony42, and then also Delphi Bracketology, as this is a very big week for bracketology purposes. So stay up to date with all that. I know that you'll be busy with that, you and your crew over there. So you can follow Craig on Twitter, Craig Bowers34, me at Joe Jackson CBB. We'll be live Friday after Purdue's first round matchup, or their first game against whoever it is.
First round win after their first round win, Joe.
There you go. First round win. And then, so we'll do that. Obviously, it's going to be crazy busy for us too. A few games, hopefully in there, hopefully many games in March, the tournament as well. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Also, I know I was on late, so we didn't get to talk about quadrants, but we'll have to do that at some point in the future. And, my distaste for the quadrant system itself. So we
basically just decided you were wrong, Joe, while you were gone. We decided your distaste was misplaced because it's just a frame or reference point. That's all.
We will see you guys Friday after the Purdue game. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Catch you then.